Hello, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to yet another wonderful episode and session of Karwaan Online History Festival Season 2. Today, I'm delighted and honored to have Professor Srinivas Reddy, sir, with us, all the way from Rhode Island, I believe. Hello, sir, and welcome to the session. Thank
Thank
you
you.
for accepting our invitation.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Today, Professor Reddy will be talking about India's past is the key to the world's future. Something that interests me and Karwan. The whole idea is to, promote heritage among young people, history among young people, to tell them the importance that history plays in our lives. Professor Srinivas is a guest professor of South and Southeast Asian Studies at IIT Gandhinagar in Gujarat and visiting assistant professor of religious studies and contemplative studies at Brown University, Rhode Island. He lives in the Rhode Island and spends his time performing, teaching, and conducting research around the world. Professor Reddy began his musical training as a guitarist and composer. In 1998, he graduated from Brown University with a BA in South Asian Studies and completed his senior project entitled NaadaSat, a multi-instrumental ensemble piece that reflected his growing interest in South Asian philosophy and music. In 2011, Srinivas Reddy graduated from UC Berkeley with a PhD in South and Southeast Asian Studies under the guidance of Professor George Hart. The, he studied Sanskrit, Tamil, and Telugu literary traditions and completed his thesis on the Vijayanagara Emperor Krishnadevaraya and his grand Telugu epic Amuktamalyada. I think I pronounced it correctly, sir. Sorry
Yeah.
for the wrong pronunciation. A translation of the work entitled Giver of the Worn Garland was published by Penguin Books in 2010. And with the same publisher, Professor Reddy has also released two translations in the Complete Kalidasa series, The Dancer and the King and the Cloud Message, Meghadutam. His recent work is on the Krishnadevaraya, a book called RAYA, and you can see a great review by Rajmohan Gandhi, Shashi Tharoor, Philip Wagoner, and William Dalrymple. So it is truly an honor and a privilege to all of us to have Professor Reddy among us this morning for him. Professor Reddy, welcome to the show, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Ishan. You're such a mature and lovely young person, and I really have to commend you for putting your energies, making that choice in your life to dedicate some of your time, or in fact, a lot of your time right now, especially during pandemic, all of your time to promoting this series and spreading all the good wisdom that we're very lucky to have as Indians. And I mean, you don't have to be Indian, but if for anyone in the world, but as Indians, of course, there's always should be a sense of pride in that heritage, because the roots of your ancestors reach back to those times and those philosophies, which, again, with India, history is not something in the past. It's a completely living history. That is the main number one point about history in India, is that it's living history. There's no past. It's all the present. So thanks again, Ishan. And so I'll just try to speak broadly about some various ideas that I've been meditating on, thinking about, and hopefully Ishan will have some questions after, and then we can have a discussion. So I'll just try to keep things pretty broad in general. So forgive me if things are not in a very focused, linear kind of progression. But the main thing I think I'd like to start with a discussion with is the idea of an Indian way of thinking. Is there something that we can call like Indian thinking? Now, without getting into certain technicalities, this question was actually posed by the great scholar A.K. Ramanujan in one of his papers, Is There an Indian Way of Thinking? And if you have not seen that paper, I highly recommend it. I highly recommend everything that A.K. Ramanujan wrote, actually, for he's my idol in terms of scholarship in South Asia of this modern period. So in that article, he discusses many things, and as I'll mention maybe a little later, he does make a definitive answer and statement about this question. And if I could go through some of the things, I actually tend to agree that there is kind of an Indian way of thinking in a broad and general sense. And I'll try to outline now some of the features of that type of thinking that I think are distinctive, unique, but not solely ours, but and at some level universal as well. So one major point, and a lot of what I'm going to say is in somewhat a type of a contrast, although I do not want to set up dichotomies in such a reified type of way. But generally what I'm talking about is a certain kind of distinction, let us say, between this Indian way of thinking and, let us say, right now, an American way of thinking. Or to put it more broadly, you could really talk about traditional, old, ancient ways of being versus more modern ways, what we would call modernity in a large sense. And I know I'm using some big words and some large ideas, but again, I hope you can just afford me this opportunity to express some of these thoughts in a somewhat broad brushstrokes, and would be happy to answer any questions and get into specifics during the discussion and questions. So one fundamental point, actually, before I get to that, I just discussed two very important words. These are, again, Western words, although they have very much Indian equivalents. They are epistemology and ontology. And what these words mean, they sound complicated, but epistemology just means how we know things, like the means by which we can know things, and the study of that. So that's kind of like a philosophical thing. This comes into Indian philosophy right in the very beginning, ancient times, and this is known as the pramanas. So the pramanas are like modes of knowing things. So like in the Indian tradition, you have inference and that kind of things. Like if you see smoke, then you can infer that there's a fire. That's like a way of knowing. You could go to an elder person, and ask them a question, and they could tell you. Or you could go to a shastra, like a text that's authoritative, and you could ask a question, and you would maybe find an answer there. Like that, they describe different things. These would all be classified under epistemological concerns. That is, questions about how we know the things we know. At a more fundamental level is an idea called ontology. Ontology is about ontos, like the beingness, how it is. What is it? What is that element of being? In some way, you could maybe translate this into tattva, thatness, as it is described. This word comes up in many different traditions. In fact, I was just working on a paper. I was mentioning the Tattvartha Sutra of the Jain Umaswati, one of the most important Jaina texts ever written. But in that, there is given one very important definition of life and existence, and that is Parasparo Upagraho Jivanam, which means that all life, all beings, are mutually paraspara, upagraha, coming into contact with each other. Now, I'll come back to some of these ideas a little bit later, but let me get to the first point that I want. Ontology is being, study of being, how things, what it is. Epistemology is studying of how I know those things, the ways I understand those things. Okay, so with these two basic terms in our mind, we can move on. Because these are epistemological and ontological concerns, is what I'm trying to say. These ways of thinking, the Indian way of thinking. In a sense, we're talking about an Indian epistemology, which is, of course, related to how we think of how things are. That is their ontology. For example, one of the most important things of the Indian way of thinking is plurality of thought. There is never one definitive and all-encompassing right answer. There are many answers. Some may be more right than others, okay? But there's still many answers. And you're always going to get the solution somehow. And they're all right in their own way. That's the thing. Because you realize that no one of them could be complete. This is most well expressed in the Jaina doctrine of Anekantavada. That is the doctrine of not one-sidedness. That you can't perceive of any entity, any being, with only one perspective. Ekanta means one perspective. So anekanta is not one perspective, multi-perspective. That's basically what the Jain philosophy is, the doctrine of multi-perspectiveness. This summarizes, a lot of how Indian systems of thought function. From a Vedic perspective, this is the Vakya that, or Sukta, usually they call it Sukta in Vedas, that the Ramakrishna mission uses in some of their, boards and things. That is, Ekam Sat, Bahuda Vipravadanti. Bahuda Vipravadanti. Bahuda has that sense too, multiple ways. Bahuda, in many, many ways. Ekam Sat, the truth is one. The being is one. The thatness is one. But the wise people, some may interpret as Brahmins, but generally you can interpret Vipraha, just means one who has wisdom. A wise person, or the wise people, Vipraha, Vadanti, they speak of it. Bahuda, in many multifold ways, many ways. So number one is this idea of a plurality of perspectives on what anything is. There is no one all-encompassing perspective. No one right path. No one perfect solution. Number two, and this again is in contrast to, this is in stark contrast to Western ideas of chronology, and which relate to, again, Western notions of what history is, and generally Western notions of time, chronos. In the Western system, time is a linear progressive system. I repeat again, it is a linear progressive system. Linear means it's just going in a line. Progressive means it has an angle to it. It has a slope. And in the current conception of Western civilization, that reminds me, Western civilization. Some reporter had asked Gandhiji once, what do you think of Western civilization? And he said, I think it would be a good idea. Gandhi was so funny. So funny. All the great masters are very comedic because life becomes very funny a lot. Anyway, getting back to the point, Western civilization progressed to the point where right now, what we may call like the post-enlightenment kind of world that we're in, and maybe we're in a different phase now with post-COVID, and that's or COVID. We're not post-COVID yet, but this moment is also a transformative moment. We have to see it that way, and we must embrace it that way. But getting back, the idea is that time is moving forward, and that things are getting better. Life is getting better. People are getting better. Technology has made us better. We can save people from diseases. We can feed more people. We can do this. We can do that. Yeah, that's all good. But when you actually just take an honest, very simple, honest look, without looking at media and all of the skewed perceptions, use your own eyes and ears and walk around your neighborhood. What do you see? I see a lot of poverty, misery, and mental illness. A great divide of the human spirit from the natural world, and a huge mental void. That's what I see. That's what's happened with this idea of progress. Now, the Indian system of time is not like that. It doesn't have a beginning. It doesn't have an end. It doesn't have a progression, or it doesn't have a linear progression. It does have a progression, because time itself is progression. Progression means change. Progression means passage of time. Therefore, all systems of time, in some sense, have progression. But the Indian system, as you all well know, is cyclical in nature. And this is the key thing. Cyclical in nature. Or I would say, in a sense, better to think of it as sinusoidal in nature. Because the sine wave just keeps going. That's what time is in India. But it has this up and down. And that up and down gives it that propulsion. Gives it the, the energy to move. That is what time itself is. It is that unrelenting movement. But in the Indian conception, all the way from Upanishadic teachings, the time is, kala is ananta and anadi. That is unending and beginningless. Ananta without end, anadi without beginning. So these two things are fundamental to Indian conceptions of time. Secondly, in the progressive idea of the sinusoidal nature, there is a feeling and an understanding of the decline of human society. And if you, again, prescribe or subscribe, rather, to the, Puranic teachings, then we are in the Kali Yuga. And this Yuga is at the bottom of the dip. It is at the absolute bottom. And by all accounts, on my reckoning, it seems very logical to me. I mean, it seemed like life was better 200 years ago. I don't know. Many people might disagree, but in my view, it was. Not to say that that was a great time either. We can do better, and we always should, no matter what. No matter what time you're in, even in Kali Yuga, you have to still do well. Now, what this idea of time does is it creates an idea of impermanence. If you're just going on in this circle, at one level it is permanent, and at another level it just means that you're one of many turns on this wheel. You're one of many waves on the great ocean, like that. There is a permanence and impermanence to the Indian system that goes back and forth. Now, when I'm talking about Indian ways of thinking, and at least from a religious perspective, let me use this again in bigger words, and we can get into details if someone wants to discuss. But Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism. Sometimes people call these the dharmic religions, which is fine. Dharma is definitely a term that all three traditions use, but there's many common terms that they use. Karma is used in all of them. Atma is used in all of them in some way. Yoga is used in all of them in some way. So it's the three are all intertwined. To see Buddhism, Jainism, Hinduism even as separate, religions that should be studied in isolation is to completely misunderstand again the whole concept of plurality of Indian thought. Buddhism and Jainism developed alongside Upanishadic thought and Brahmanic ritual. And both of them fed each other and influenced each other in very productive and interesting ways. That's the whole history of Indian philosophy. On one level, you have the kind of Brahmanic line of ritualism, the Vedic thing, and then you have Buddhism and Jainism, which deny the Vedas and bring in the whole yogic line. That is the self-revelatory, self-experience line. So when these two main pathways of Indian, religious practice and thought come together, that's really what develops into the heart of what we may call Indian ways of knowing and being. Now, all three of these contrast very clearly with what are known as the Abrahamic Faith. Abraham being like the oldest of the respected people who gave these traditions their beginning. So in the Abrahamic faiths, you have Judaism, then comes next Christianity, and then comes next Islam. All three worship same God, one God, Yahweh, Jehovah, Allah. All same, everything same. Muhammad looks back to Jesus as a prophet. Jesus looks back at Moses as a prophet. Like that. They're all one big tradition. So if you put the Abrahamic faiths on one side and the Dharmic faiths on the other, you see a great contrast. The Abrahamic faith, again, linear time, progressive time, and this leads to the idea of one life, one body. I, my final resting place. This creates a certain kind of, because it's a type of ontological kind of claim, creates a type of epistemological viewpoint, which again I'm saying and trying to stress is in clear contrast to Indian epistemological thoughts. We don't believe in one life. We don't believe in one God. You can believe in whatever God you want. You don't have to believe in a God at all. That is irrelevant. All of these things become very difficult. So ideas like secularism, all of the words, the discourse, the language which you use today, we are still exhibiting our colonial mindset. India today is just as much a colony as it was in 1946, maybe more so, because it's so entrenched within our minds and in our hearts. To run for America, to run after money, to run after Western things. I'm not saying that those things are bad. I enjoy this. I grew up in America. I love America too. But there's a lot of problems here. A lot of problems. So what I'm trying to say is it creates a very different kind of thinking. A type of thinking that I'm saying in many ways we Indians have lost. Luckily, as Indians, we have that 4,000 years of history, cultural tradition going on that we can kind of like rest on. We have our grandmothers and grandparents and elders still, but it's changing fast. But they're still there. We have big family networks. In a country like America, 250 years old, if that, they have nothing to go back on. There's no deep past to reach into. All of the deep past that was in this country was completely destroyed. The Native Americans, the large numbers of tribes and peoples of this nation, of this continent, were amazing. And they were different, and they fought, and they did everything, but they lived here for tens of thousands of years. We have evidence of that. And more than anything else, they come from an epistemology which is very similar to the Indian one. They have a deep, deep, deep connection to nature. No matter what, all the native tribes have their own, beliefs and systems, but all of them share this common bond of respect for nature. And then again, from an epistemological perspective, the biggest shift that happened when America was founded was the Indians did not believe in property ownership, in land ownership. This was a complete, again, epistemological shift based on an ontological concept of what land is, of what the Mother Earth is. So what I'm trying to describe is there's old ways of being that have been wiped out for the most part, at least in this nation. Luckily in India, they have not been wiped out, but they are being wiped out now, not by a foreign colonial power like the British, but by our own choices and decisions as we move forward as a country. So a couple of other points, and then I'll just pass it over. Personally, I feel the most important challenge we should all be thinking about today around the world, and something that could bring us together in a positive way rather than moving into bickering, is the health of the planet. Now, right now we're very concerned with the health of humanity, but the health of humanity and the rise of COVID is nothing but a simple reaction that the Earth had to give out to a wasteful, polluting, and excessively prideful species. And it's just the natural way. This is how viruses appear amongst the plants and animals, and this is how they appear amongst us humans too. It is high time that we stop thinking of ourselves as anything above or beyond nature. If anything, we're 100% a part of nature, and we're a very little part of nature, and we should be a humble part of her. And the whole goal of humanity really is to live more in harmony with that nature and to use that precious gift of our creativity and intelligence, not necessarily to build big things or fly to the moon or whatever, but to be guardians and protectors of the earth, to steward those old traditions into the future so that our children may learn from them and know them. You know, I'll just mention a personal thing that happened to me. You know, a couple of weeks ago, I was walking and I saw that there were some trees, these beautiful trees where I walked, and there was two people sitting there, and they said, "Oh, they're going to cut these trees down, you know, because of an electrical line that's coming." And I said, "No way, they can't do that. Can I bring my sitar to come and play there with the trees?" And they said, "Yeah, sure." And what started that day turned into an 11-day sit-in, or sitar-in, as I called it, although I didn't play sitar every day. On the first day, I sat there from 6:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. From other days, I sat for hours with the trees. Others helped, many others helped. And we tried to get the city and the forestry department and the National Grid electrical company to not cut down the trees, but in the end, they did. And it just shows that in this world, trees are just something to be used for the benefit of mankind. They have no rights. Now, this might sound like a weird thing to say, but plants have rights. Plants are much older than us, much wiser species than us. They've been around for millions of years. They have a special intelligence that is beyond what we can understand. But because we have this technology and this power, we feel that they are there to serve us. And yes, to a certain extent they are. Trees build houses and do all sorts of important things, and we eat herbs and plants and vegetables and fruits. All of that is good, but that is a symbiotic relationship. The tree is benefiting, the human is benefiting, everyone is benefiting in the natural flow. But once we start meddling too much, things start going wrong. And that's really what Gandhiji was talking about. You see, India basically had a major choice after independence. The yoke of colonialism was lifted. What were you going to do with a whole new nation? At that stage, there were basically two main pathways: the Gandhian path and the Nehruvian path. And as you well know, we went hard into the Nehruvian path, so hard that it has taken us here to the current state of situation where people in our country are starving every day. We have the worst human indices in the world. It's shameful and pathetic. We have a dirty, dirty country and we pollute it. Or we could have gone a Gandhian way, which people thought was stupid and silly, retrograde, to live simple village life, agricultural life, with the land. In that model, not everyone would have all these big things, but everyone would have what they need. What was, oh yeah, I was just reading Gandhiji's statement. The world has enough for everyone's need, but not for everyone's greed. And it's true. It is greed which makes it happen. So if I had one thing which I am trying to do in my own life is to reduce all expenditure, to engage in the capitalist money system, even at some kind of better end, is still something which should be limited. Think creatively. How can I make this on my own, or do something else? Or I think there are beautiful ways that we have, and a lot of the old stories from India that we could draw on these lessons and learn from them. So, yeah, so on the ecology part, probably the most ecologically oriented religion in the world is Jainism. Jaina philosophy from the beginning, although Buddhism had ahimsa, the yoga school has ahimsa. I mean, everybody has ahimsa, but no other tradition stressed ahimsa to the level and to the degree to which the Jaina monks did. I was joking and laughing to myself the other day. I saw some people coming out of a bank or something, and they were wearing white and all with their masks, and they looked like some Jaina monks, some Digambar monks. I mean, they have to be naked to be Digambar monks, but everyone's becoming a Jain now. Everyone was wearing a mask. So people used to say these Jains are crazy. They carry a whisk around to swat out little bugs where they sit. They keep this mask so they don't ingest any mosquitoes or something. I mean, these people have taken it to an extreme. And it's true, they have. But see, there's an example. There are people in this world that made that choice. Just as there's an extreme of wealth, a 30,000 floor building with 50 cars in Bombay by our richest people in the country, India is filled with so many millionaires, only to equal so many poor people. What a shame, a disgrace. The movie industry, again, another disgrace. No morals are coming out of that, and people are just using it. It's all part of a type of mindset that is taken over, and it is, each individual's will to reduce and decide to say, no, instead of a cheap Bollywood movie, I'll watch a nice documentary on, some Indian history. That would be great. And we can make history fun. History's so fun and interesting. So many wonderful stories and adventures. Right now, I'm working on trying to turn RAYA into a movie. We have a lot of young people who want to get interested in history, but it has to be presented in a nice way, not in that dry kind of boring way of dates and figures, but the narratives. We need to get into the stories of the characters. These are all the real fun of life. And when you look into life histories of people, the characters of these people, they give us the teachings of how to deal with the problems of our own life. Like Arjuna's dilemmas, Yudhishthira's dilemmas, those things are very real to me. I recall those to my mind whenever I'm facing some particular thing. That's what makes the Indian story so great. Or Kabir Ka Dohe, or in Telugu Vemana Padyalu, or whatever it may be. You're going on anywhere in life, and then something happens, and you remember a Kabir poem, and then it comes to you and it gives you an insight. That's a type of knowledge. That's a beautiful thing. Why don't we teach those things in school? I don't know. So it's all a matter of perspective. We need leadership to do that. So the last thing I really have to say is that there's a sad irony at hand in all of this. Because as much as I love and praise all of this Indian thought and tradition, and put it in contrast to Western civilization or whatever, modernity, the heartbreaking reality of it is we Indians are the ones that are not studying our own stuff. If I need to read a good scholarly work on whatever, Vijayanagara, or whatever, the Mughals, many times I'm compelled to go to a Western scholar who's writing in English because they've done some deep research. But of course, this has to do with the fact that in our culture, the humanities are not well promoted. Oh, you want to be a history teacher? What are you going to do with that history teacher? Oh, that's not going to be helpful. Mom and dad want you to be engineer. So all of this, that culture needs to change. The government needs to help. We need incentives. We need to have programs. We need to have all sorts of things. So what I'm saying is India has all the answers, but it's not listening to them. The Western world has none of the answers, but they're finding them in India. That's why they're doing yoga and Goga and Buddhism and everything, but we're not. So if India can just remember her past, if we can get back in touch with those old things and respect them for what they are, and also critique them for what they are, then I really do believe we can have a beautiful future for not only India, but then become the exemplar for the rest of the world on how to live a wholesome and fulfilling natural life. Okay, that'll be it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. And I think it is very important to understand what you mentioned. And, on the point that studying history, I would say that where we went wrong is when we confined history to a classroom, making it a dull subject, whereas history is all about exploration. heritage sites and
Right.
nature, as you said. So, my first question would be that, you mentioned the Indian thought of being the one, being is one. Do you think this thought should be revived in India, especially when there's increasing communalism in the society? People are against each other, creed, class, religion. Do you think this should be revived in India in 2020 and beyond?
Absolutely. It has to be revived, but it can't be revived saying that this is like a Hindu perspective. This is a perspective that all religions actually have. They get messed up by different factors.
Yeah,
But the unity thing has to be balanced. See, unity, like Nehru said, unity and diversity. So those two things are really parallel things. That
yeah,
our strength comes from that interplay, in the sense that, and this is where they make a distinction between the two different models. Like America is a melting pot, right?
yeah,
Melting pot, yeah. So melting pot, matlab, all these cultures come in, and then everyone melts into one thing, and it becomes like one nice soup, one uniform thing.
hmm,
India is not like that at all. And you can say good or bad about what it may be, but the bottom line is it's not like that. What India is, and they call it, is the salad bowl. I don't know if you heard this one, but people talk about it. So in the salad, you have the lettuce, you have tomato, you have cucumber, you have carrot, they're distinct, but together they make a salad. So
yeah,
we're like that. And I think that's a good model, actually, because the assimilation model, it actually destroys culture. See, the carrot, it loses itself for that thing in the soup. Whereas a carrot, it can still be itself and still contribute to the salad in that model. That's the way India is. And I hate to say it this way, but that's what caste does. Caste keeps communities together in India. It keeps families together. So I know there's a lot of, I can't even mention the word caste without someone getting angry at me, but there are good things about caste as a concept, as an idea of family and community, kula, like we say, that all of those features are very important because, again, the society is so different. In India, you don't do things for you. You have to do things for your family, your mom and dad and your brothers, and say what is going to work for everybody. You don't make an individual decision and say, I just want to do this, I'm going to go do it. No, you have your individual desires, but you have to weigh those against what mommy says, what papa says, what bhaiya says, what, all people that are involved, your stakeholders, your family, right? In America, iPhone, iPad, I this, I me, all me, what I'm doing, forget you, mommy, daddy. I don't care about you. I hate you. I'm leaving home. I'm never coming back. This is typical growing up. I did this to my parents even growing up here. I had to come back too and realize what I had done.
yes. In about 500 BC, there were public spaces in every neighborhood across South Asia called the Kotuhalshala, literally meaning the place for public debates and discussions where Jaina, Buddhists, and Hindu monks would come, gather around, have peaceful and public discourse about various subjects in the society. Do you think that is missing in India and in the world, where the war and violence is increasing every day? Do you think there's a need to revive that tradition of discussion, that public discourse, the Kotuhalashalas all across the world?
Yes. See, there's no dialogue right now. The world has no dialogue. The only dialogue anyone ever hears is they open up, if you're a liberal fellow, you open up the liberal news and you hear everything you want to hear that all your best friends are also telling you. If you're a conservative fellow, you open up the conservative news, you hear everything you want to hear and you discuss with your conservative buddies. And all one group says is that group is an idiot, and this group says that group is an idiot. So there's no discussion right now. See, what that comes from, again, is that epistemological frame that there is a correct way. There's one way. So if I'm this side, then he's automatically wrong. If I'm that side, I'm automatically wrong. That is the problem with that epistemology. You go to an Indian epistemology, Anekantavada, he says, I don't agree with you, but TK. I don't agree with this guy either, but That could be right, whatever, I don't care. But I believe what I believe. You see, back to the idea of, individuality can exist in a harmonious way because you, as an individual, understand that I'm not everything here. I'm just one thing of many.
Yeah.
We need. The thing is, India has lost that sense of dialogue as well. India is the same thing as America. Congress, BJP, same.
So yeah, there's a need to revive that old tradition of the Kutuhalashala, not only in India, but we have to teach that to the world as well. Because India is going to be the youngest nation, the youth is going to take over the world, and it is very important to teach the youngsters tolerance, the idea of public discourse, and even the idea of public dissent on necessary issues. That is very important in a democracy.
Yes.
Coming to the part of your book Raya, the Krishnadevaraya.
Yeah.
Why did you decide to write on that particular king? The Vijayanagara Empire was known for the fortification, the 7 layers of fort, and then the water management system. Do you think that we should, take inspiration from the Vijayanagara Empire, or what was the motive behind writing this book?
Yeah. So 2 questions quickly. We'll do a whole session on Vijayanagara one day. But
yeah, sure.
The inspiration for the book was, it all came from my thesis. I first read the Amuktamalyada, the text. So the king wrote a great poem. So I was a literature student, so I just was reading the text. Then as I was reading, I was like, oh, this guy's like a pretty interesting king and has an interesting history. I mean, I knew about him, but I didn't know all these details. So then I got into that, but I didn't write anything about it. Except my thesis. So this was really like going back to my first book, combining work with my thesis and other things that I did into one nice book. So it was really a good project, good thing. What was the second one? Because the second part was more interesting. I wanted to answer that.
Yeah, what we can learn from the Vijayanagara Empire, there was water management systems.
Yeah. So actually, we do exactly this kind of stuff at IIT Gandhinagar. Like Michelle, we were talking we have an archaeological sciences center. Here's a perfect example, okay, of how you can bring this stuff in. Archaeological sciences. Let's bring all our engineering guys who know how to do some scanning, and Amit Prashant, he does the underground sensing, remote sensing guys. All these engineers, these skills are there on campus. Why not apply it to an archaeological site? So, for example, this one, Lothal in Gujarat, it's very clear that this was a dock site where boats were going off into the places. And then you look at a place like Dholavira. You were asking about technology. The kind of water management they were doing at Dholavira is like better than what we do with like modern day pipes. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why the old systems, not always, but many times work better, and they're still like working today. It's like crazy. Like you could, if you wanted to, you could flow water through there. Why not? The point is that, their mode of building something like that was to listen to the natural landscape and work with it, work around it, what was necessary, right? Not destroy trees just because I want to make a straight line. Although they did make straight lines. They made very clear angles. And so they were very precise engineers. Brick structure was all formulaic, all of that stuff. But there's a certain kind of respect and integration with the landscape, I feel, that we sometimes just miss out because we have our idea of what we want the land to be. We're not asking the land, let me hear what I can make out of this place. And I write this actually, maybe I should find that little section, but I write that in the in RAYA, because RAYA, if you go to Hampi, if you go to that side of Karnataka, anywhere in that part of the Deccan, even Hyderabad has a lot of this, just these massive boulders and, almost magical quality to how the light hits the boulders. And then, of course, then there's the mythological, this is all Kishkinda, this is the land where Hanuman, right? So you're in that world. And then these guys, now I lost my train of thought. We're talking about the technology.
Technology.
Yeah. I'll just remember. I was going technology, then the boulders. Anyway, I forgot. The point is that there's a lot of very useful technological developments that were made, simple solutions maybe, but cost effective, efficient, and here's the key thing, suited to an Indian climate and environment. There is no reason India should be having huge buildings with glass and this stuff. Stone is a fantastic building material for India. If we have it in India readily available, it keeps things nice and cool. You know, you get the real nice cooling effect. I mean, instead of then having to have glass and then spending thousands on AC that's bringing in so much sunlight. I mean, it's all a madness, you know. So if we learned and just listened to what those guys were doing in the past, we'd have a lot of solutions to some of our problems. But again, the solutions are not technology. The solutions are humans making a choice. See, we're still at the phase where we're like, we're going to find a technology that's going to feed more people. We're going to find a beam that can withstand drought. We're going to find we're going to go to the moon so we can settle that place once we run out of space. I mean, it's all pichi pagal. I mean, it's a crazy people. Complete madness. Complete madness.
So this brings me to this thought that, you know, with the advent of globalization in the world, you know, the growing globalization, and when it hit India, many of us, you know, forgot our you know, traditions, and, you know, blindly started following the Western civilization. And I think that is where we lost the track, and we just wanted to copy the Westerners, the foreigners.
Yeah.
Like you said, the glass buildings, and we forgot our roots from where we came.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that that's not natural, or I mean, it's unfortunate, but it's natural. I mean, look, as a consciousness, you have a people who came out of, you know, basically a type of slavery for 250 years. We're still, and this is how these types of oppressive regimes take place, and when they leave, how colonialism lingers. Because Indians, especially then, you know, they were just like, you know, okay, we're good enough to be like you now. So we have to prove ourselves by being like you, as being your equal. So that's simply the Nehruvian perspective. India is this ancient culture. Yeah, we're awesome, but we're also a world power. We should stand as equals amongst the other great nations of the world, which is true. But it doesn't have to come through having a lot of money or nuclear powers. It can come through having a spiritual wisdom that, you know, people come to as like a source of learning. That is our heritage, to be honest. I mean, that's the truth. That's India's greatest.
I think collaboration is important than copying. You know, we should collaborate with others. We should take inspiration from their technologies and their, you know, their knowledge, and we should inculcate in our, you know, existing knowledge, and then we should implement it for our future.
Right.
So we were also discussing this before the lecture, that, you know, the government is now, you know, giving more focus on the sciences and the medicine, and they're somewhere, you know, ignoring the humanities subjects, especially history. And there are attempts to, you know, I think, reducing the grants to the universities for humanities. What do you think about this? What are your views? Should we, you know, what you can say, should we make students interested in history more than science and technology, or as you mentioned, that we should collaborate both the subjects in one and should do something new?
Right. So lots of thoughts on Indian education, but yeah, the second, what you said, second is best. See, my feeling is all subjects are equal and everything should be available. My biggest concern, as I saw this every day, is you have so many, I mean, India, we have so many people and we're so smart and so talented. You know, how is it that we don't have like so many great artists? How is it that we don't have great sportsmen all over the world? Why don't we win gold medals all the time? Why is this? Because our culture is telling us that's not as valuable as becoming an engineer. And so the greatest tragedy of this type of thinking is that you are destroying the natural talent of the country. You have a guy that's pretty good at math, but he's an amazing footballer.
Yeah.
So all the way up until 10, he's footballing, loving it, and he's doing pretty good at math. And then mommy, daddy say, time to go to your, tuition. And then no more football. Pushed into math. Pushed to take that thing. All creativity gone. All things wasted in the mind. The youth, we're destroying the most precious thing that we have in our country. That is the minds of our youths. So, and then that guy, you crushed an potential Olympic world footballer to make a mediocre engineer.
Yeah. So I think it is very important to understand this for the public who are listening to us.
So families need to change, but families change when government changes and policies change, and different people are honored and respected. You know what I mean? Like we who are our heroes? We don't respect. We respect either you're a millionaire who worked at a tech company, or you're a movie star. I mean, those are our two heroes. Gandhi, Ambedkar, they're like empty heroes these days. You put a statue up, sounds good. Once you put a statue up, you don't have to discuss Gandhi anymore. Once you put a garland over Ambedkar, you don't need to discuss Ambedkar. You publicly showed you love Ambedkar. But you never read Ambedkar, you never read Gandhi, you never read the great thoughts that these men and all those thoughts are relevant to us now. Those are just what we should do is underneath all of those Gandhi and Ambedkar statues, we should have those charcha time like you were talking about. We should have that shalas to discuss things. That's what should happen. Not empty ritualistic prayer to some idols. Neither Gandhi nor Ambedkar would approve of that at all. And I guarantee that's one thing both of them would agree on.
Yeah, true. That's true. So,
actually, they agreed on a lot, to be honest. People like to make a big deal of putting them against each other like they were enemies, but they had much more respect for each other than they did antagonism.
Yeah. So I was writing about this this morning that heritages are showed in India as a picnic spot for people, whereas in in foreign countries and other countries, they are very important places that are a symbol of our identity, of who we are, how our identity was shaped over the last many years. Do you think this is also one reason for the neglect of history over the years?
Yeah, I mean, see, this goes into some deep things, like Indian sense of history, right? Itihasa.
Yeah.
Itihasa means itihasa. Thus it was.
It happened. Yeah.
Thus it really was. I mean, actually, that ha means really. Iti thus, ha, really, asa, it was. So it really happened. That's the meaning of itihasa. Of course, itihasa for our definition is Mahabharata and Ramayana. So what ends up happening is you have one side of scholarship, usually Indians, who are out to prove the exact date of the Kurukshetra war, whether it's 3029 BC or 5908 BC or 55,908. I don't know. So that's one thing. Then there's the other guys, all the Western scholars, Germans and Americans, who say, the Mahabharata text was probably composed around this time, and editions were made for the next 500 years, and blah, 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 and we've created a critical edition so everyone can read it. Okay, both of those are great. I have no problem with either of those camps, necessarily. But both, again, are incorrect. They have not come to middle to understand that both camps, why both camps are incorrect? Both camps are incorrect because they're applying a Western idea of history as an understanding and as a concept to the Indian past, which is not historical. The Indian consciousness is not a historical type of consciousness when I use the word history. You understand? It's about memory. That is why Itihasa comes under the group of texts known as Smriti, the things that are remembered. They're passed down.
Oral tradition, yeah.
Yeah, oral tradition. Non-fixity. How is it that a text that was an oral tradition has so much similarity across the length and breadth of India? That shows that this kind of variation and, assembly of some unity can happen at the same time. Everybody knows Mahabharata, but in every region, Mahabharata is different.
Yeah.
Right? There's no Mahabharata where the Pandavas don't go to the forest. I never heard that one before. Maybe there are, but I never heard that, right? So same thing. There's no Ramayana where Rama and Sita don't go to the forest. So some things are the same, but then it gets interpreted in different ways. So when you approach, if your question is, what is the historical date of the Mahabharata? The question itself is flawed, is my point. The Indian scholars have mostly gone out to prove accurately, based on all sorts of calculations of the moon and stars, that this was the date of the Mahabharata. The Western scholars, on the other hand, have done everything they can to prove that the Mahabharata never happened, has no history attached to it whatsoever. It's just a story. The truth of me as an Indian, what I feel is both of those things are irrelevant to me, and they're both kind of true, but I don't even care. First of all, to discuss the exact date is a waste of time. To say that it has no historical relevance is, again, a waste of time. So for me, both camps, and the question itself is all completely irrelevant. And that is the problem with modern academia, is that it's mired up in that level of discourse. Whereas there's so much wealth of information that has not been translated, has not been written about, has not been studied in any systematic way, that we should be putting our energies towards. Not such useless things like this.
Yes. Sir, there are some questions from the audience.
One thing I want to suggest, I've been thinking about,
Yes.
There's like in America, they have this thing, Peace Corps. So you go to, you sign up, you're a young person, you want to do something, you want to contribute, you sign up and you go to some country and you do some work, fine. The Peace Corps actually got kicked out of India, but that's a different story. I think we could create like a heritage corps where you could sign up for 1 year and the whole thing would be to document your local area. Go and find what temple is there, what little something is there, or maybe there's a spring, a natural spring that some people have been going to, or an old tree that people have been venerating for a long time. Whatever it may be, you take an ethnographic heritage, survey of your area, and what the program would be. It would be a national program. It would have like you'd have to take like a course to learn how to do things. You'd get certain forms that everyone fills out. It goes into the database. You upload it up there. You get a certificate or whatever, and that would be it.
Something on this lines we are also doing at Karwaan. We have been doing a people's movement called #YeHaiDeshMera, where we are inviting people from all across the country to document their heritages, the tangible and intangible heritages of their areas, which are on the verge of extinction, or they are already forgotten with time. So we are also trying to facilitate a platform on different social media platforms, on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, where people can start tagging us and start using the hashtag #YeHaiDeshMera with all the information they know about heritages and what is the importance of heritage. They can also write about that, and I think that will also help people to know about their area or their heritage, their past. And I think that will be a good beginning of what you said, the heritage core project that you were mentioning.
Yeah. Because one important thing is to you have to train people. You can't just do this.
Yes.
I mean, it doesn't have to be a lot of training, but some basic training, basic terminology, basic etiquette of how to deal with sites and natural things. So that kind of training. It could be like an online course even. And then some kind of uniform platform or form or whatever, where all the data would be input in an organized way and put and centralized. So that let's say I wanted to search hero stones in Karnataka. I go, hero stone Karnataka. Then like all 6 of these things will come up. It'll be something like that.
Yes.
But yeah, that's
and I think we'll surely do that, and we'll also brainstorm with other young people in the community to how we can facilitate that with collaborating with organizations like INTAC and other organizations that are working for heritage conservation. Now we'll take some questions from the audience, and there are many questions actually, and let us just take some questions. First question is from Arun G, and this question is: in the beginning of your talk, you mentioned that, yeah.
The way you mentioned about history, I initiating your talk. Then when glorification of past became started getting primacy and also important and why. I didn't quite get the question.
I think he wants to know about the glorification of past that has been going on in the country.
Oh, yeah. All right, I understand. Well, you see again, you see that moment when you get independence. You want to say that I'm just as good as you. I'm not the oppressed one. I have my own individuality. I have my own identity. That feeling, as a nation, I'm saying, is coming. And so for some time that was going on, but lately, the increase as of late is due to, again, something that we see all around the world, a type of populist politics that's sweeping around, where you want to take the largest group and rouse them with kind of images of glory and wonder, and that unify that group and maybe exclude others. But so to say that we had flying airships because the Vimanas are mentioned in the Ramayana, that's not even glorification. That's just utter exaggeration. We have no evidence from the scientific Sanskrit text of that time that flying machines were possible. There's all sorts of great technology in India, though. Why don't we talk about that? Like you said, the water technology, how rainwater is stored. I mean, that might not sound very fancy like a flying machine, but it's real, it's practical, and it's highly useful. So glorification, again, is coming from a sense of insecurity, which one need not have. If one has that great Indian past behind them, one not feel insecure about anything. We are the successors of one of the greatest wisdom traditions of the world, if not the greatest. Yeah. I mean, Buddhism came from India. No one remembers that sometimes. Buddhism is Indian, period. Okay, it may not be existing in India now, but it went to China, Japan, Korea, Thailand, Sri Lanka, Vietnam, Cambodia, and then later America. But it's all Dalai Lama these days. I mean, I think the last four lectures I've heard in the last few years, every time, all he talks is Nalanda Buddhism, Indian Buddhism, the Nalanda Buddhism. That's what Tibetan Buddhism is, Nalanda Buddhism.
Yeah.
There's some practice coming.
Okay. Is it better now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's also a debate that has been going on for years among scholars, that there's a thin line between myth and history, and for some people myth is also a kind of history. So I think that is important to understand.
Well, so on that point, I would argue that the line is not thin at all. It's a really broad line where they're mixing, and things are very confusing. So thin nahi hai. It's like a wide line.
Yeah. So this is a question from JL Nagarji. What are we missing to make Indian history to be a lighthouse to the world?
What we're missing is that we don't know our own history. I mean, I ask basic history questions to Indians all the time, and even the most simple thing is, I mean, I asked IIT students, what was the age of, the year of Buddha? The answers I got shocked me. I won't even tell you, but I'll tell you the differential in answers was over 3,000 years. So
that is a sad part.
To read and get a very good grasp on Indian history first. Then we can be a lighthouse to the world. But we can't be a lighthouse until we shine our own light.
Yeah. So this question is very interesting by Shubhra Ghosh. That how do you think that we can make our people interested in history, especially because you are an educator yourself, you teach engineers history.
Yeah, I do. So like, I'll give you one example I did in class, and then I'll mention one other idea I have. So in the classroom, for example, I used to teach World Civ class. But Professor Jain asked me to teach World Civ class because it was the most hated class among students. So he said, boss, you do it. I was like, great. It became the most popular class. I had all the second year BTech students. So one year we did, it was called Gates of Ahmedabad project. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I broke up all the guys and girls into 20 groups or something. Or no, I forget. 12 groups. So there's 12 gates, old gates or something like that. I forget the number in old Ahmedabad, old city, right? So I assigned one gate to each of the groups. And I said, you have to go to that gate. You have to talk to those local people. You have to find out what's going on with that gate. You have to describe that gate, go do research in the books, and then make a 5-minute YouTube video. You guys can still go and watch it. That was the best. They said, sir, this is the best class we ever had. I gave them money. They got to take rickshaw to Old City, have some snacks, have fun, interact with people. I mean, this is what it's pure fun. Nothing but a fun. To interact with people, local people, you know, to take pictures, to read these old inscription or something. So it's just, you have to make it fun. The other thing that I feel like outside of the classroom, like I was saying earlier, like I'm working on, you have these Netflix series you have Game of Thrones and and all that, fighting and sort. All of Indians, old stories are like that. I mean, they're so good. So we didn't need to make like Netflix series on, the Chalukyas or, like whatever it is, whatever empire, Vijayanagara, whatever. So stuff like that would be fun. Or you take other types of stories. It doesn't have to be about empires. Why not tell the story of like Kalidasa, a whole movie about Kalidasa, with great sets and good acting. This excites people. Movies, I love movies. So, I was complaining about Bollywood earlier, and I still would. But, a lot of those movies, even the historical ones now, fall into that category of completely violent, poor writing, poor acting, and completely nationalistic kind of stuff without any sense of true historical perspective. So that's not history, that's propaganda. So we need to get away from propaganda. We should get to real history. And we should do it in an entertaining, exciting way so that young people can be involved and be excited.
So the most important thing is to go outside the classroom, because even as history students, we get to go out for a heritage walk once a year. So that's kind of shocking, because as history student we should be more exploratory in nature.
Yes, all education should be like that. Being in the classroom is the biggest waste of time, especially nowadays with the Zoom technology and all this stuff. What is a teacher doing? Teacher is just giving some inspiration. One has to discover on their own through their own swa abhyasa, their own self-study. You don't tell the kids, here are the 25 species of plants and this thing and that thing. You tell them, all you have to do is go identify the 10 trees on campus right here. If you can't do it, you can't do it. Yeah, and let them use the internet. Let them use their phone if they want. But, it should be like that. That's all you need to do to teach everything. The biggest problem with teaching today is people overteach. The less you teach, the better it is. The less I talk, the more you talk, better it is.
Yeah. There's a question from Harsha Vardhan Eluri. But if you don't systematically enlist or do historiography, it will be vague history forever. Do you think so? Do you need historiography to make history, I think, logical?
Well, I mean, yes, of course. So now, the first point is read the history books. Number one. So that's first step. Most of our country is not even at step one. But if you want to discuss steps 2 and 3, I'm fine. Step 2 comes the historiography, right? So I'll give you an example for my own research because I discussed this at quite a bit of length. Historiography is very, very important. But you can't do historiography until you've read multiple histories. So first you can read multiple histories. Then you can do a historiographic analysis. Now, what does historiography really mean? Historiography simply means the history of history writing. It is let's look at how the evolution of this history has happened over time in writing. For example, in my work, Vijayanagara, the most critical big work that kind of inaugurated Vijayanagara studies was Robert Sewell's book of Forgotten Empire. In that book, he characterizes Vijayanagara as, the last stronghold of Hinduism against the onslaught of Mohammedan power and blah, 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 right? Now, this axiom of history gets repeated by Nilakanta Shastri, all Indian scholars that follow, most Western scholars that follow, until about 20, 30 years ago when people started questioning this a little bit. And then you have a whole new set of scholarship that's come out by people like Eaton and Wagner, who kind of swing the pendulum the other way and say, well, Islam had nothing to do with this stuff. I mean, there was Islamic culture coming in, but this had nothing to do. So again, both of those things are, I think, a little bit maybe sometimes too, because there's a lot of critique right now in India of people like Eaton, that whitewash certain things, like the destruction of temples by Muslims, for example. So what we need to do is read all of those histories, then understand the historiography, how that evolution of thought, and then we come up with our own theories. Then maybe we can have journals where young people can write small articles, and you can maybe get more points for that, or you get extra credit, or it looks good on your resume. Why not? It could be an online thing, so things like that. So historiography, yes, is very, very important, but it's the second step after reading history.
Yes. So I think in the end of this session, it is important to understand that we have to include the youngsters in, with history, and we have to teach them history in a very interesting way that might appeal them. So to end this session, my only question to you would be, you mentioned Gandhi many times in the session. Do you see a way going back to the Gandhian economy, less industrialization, more rural economy? Any of that sort in the future of India?
I hope so, Nishan. If you ask me realistically, I don't see it happening. But even though that might be, as a country, as a nation, might not really make those kinds of large decisions, I do now more and more see individuals making certain important choices to, live a very simple life, maybe to sell their house, live in a more rural area or a farmhouse type place, or somewhere a little bit farther out. Grow their own food, I think, is one of the best things. And in a country like India, you have a year-round growing season. It's such a beautiful thing. So everyone should be growing their own food. Vegetarian food is best. Vegan food is even better. So those are all the things that I want to do in my life. And I feel like I'm going to do that. And if this country or India moves in that direction, I'm more happy. But one has to, at the end, become clear about what you want in your life and how you feel, what choices are going to make you feel most wholesome and most capable of reaching your fullest potential. And these are the things that I feel strongly about and I want to be better about, and I'm going to do it. And I know there's other people that will join along.
Yeah, just to add on that, you mentioned that living with nature. I was listening to a video, an interview of a climate activist who decided to go without going to the grocery store for 1 year, and he planted his own trees. He made his own food, and then it was in America, I think Arizona or somewhere,
Sure.
that there are community gardens,
Yeah.
which is missing in India.
Yeah.
So it is free for everyone.
There's a lot of good things that we can learn from things that Americans do. That really is the whole point. That in my whole life, there are good things in old Indian ways. There are good things in new American ways. We need to bring those two together in a harmonious way and maximize the potential of our people.
Yes. So thank you very much, Professor Reddy, for your time, for this wonderful interaction session.
Yeah, thank you.
It was insightful and very interesting because, as youngsters, we too are intrigued with this question of the contribution that we are going to make in this country and on this world. because after this year, we will be the youngest nation with the oldest civilization, as I say every time.
Yeah.
And it is very important to keep both the things in symphony, the young spirit of the nation and the old roots of the nation.
Yes.
So
Wonderful.
thank you very much, everybody who joined us live. This video will be available on our YouTube channel, so everybody please do subscribe to it. Thank you.
Thank you.